Hello and welcome back to another Let's Talk edition. As always, I'm joined by Dan. How's it going there?
Hey there, guys. How's it going? Hey there, Pujiks. I'm so glad to be here with you for yet another great episode. I just can't wait to get started and share our ideas with our wonderful listeners.
Love it. Love it. It's always awesome to chat with you and chat with our audience. I'm hopeful that we're going to produce an awesome episode today. And okay, so today we are basically borrowing a concept from one of our lovely fellow mentors, if you will, one of the guys that we both like and follow, I believe. And the concept goes like this: if you are alive, defeat is only psychological. Now, can you give us an introduction of what the whole thing is about?
That's right. Very well. So you mentioned Jocko Willink, who's one of the, perhaps the icons, one of the legends among basically Navy SEALs. And for those of us who don't know what a Navy SEAL is, SEAL stands for sea, air, basically, and land. So basically, these are the toughest mofos you can possibly find all over the world. And these are the fighters that people turn into when all the other fighters have lost hope, basically. And you can imagine going to that situation, becoming basically a special forces commander, and that in the process, of course, you're going to develop a lot of ideas that will transform your very personality and make you a different person. And part of what he says, as you already pointed out, is that apart from death, all other defeats are psychological. And I couldn't agree more with what Jocko says in this regard, because ultimately defeat is a state of mind. That is, it's nothing more than the way you feel. It is what in NLP we call a state. So defeat is an emotional state that you experience upon facing with situations that you did not expect, or in cases where you feel like what you expected was not realized. So it's a combination of different emotions. Let's say frustration, anger, hopelessness. All of those eventually somehow allow you to get away from the positive thinking, and they somehow make you succumb to negativity. And because of this, I really believe that if you want to somehow know how to take control of your life, then you better learn to somehow defeat the concept of defeat, and to know that it's nothing more than an emotional state, and that truly, if you're alive, there's always a chance, and that there is no such thing as defeat if you're truly alive, because you're now working on your passion, working on your mission, and this is going to allow you to actually keep moving forward. I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion today.
I'm sure it will be. And so I remember at some point, Jocko was actually explaining one of these things that along the lines of, okay, if you're going in war with an enemy, then beating them in a battle, defeating them in a battle is not enough, because you either have to kill them or they will have to surrender. Because as we all know, there's the famous saying that says, lose the battle, win the war, kind of thing. So if you're winning the battle, it doesn't mean that the enemy say it's done. Now we don't need to think of enemies as like actually the battlefield, real life warfare enemies. Our enemies could be our ego. Our enemies could be the fact that we are lazy, or we don't want to, or our biology, basically, perhaps. So we could have a lot of enemies in that we are basically struggling with them. We are battling with them on a day-to-day life. We every single day, like I'm sure you will attest to that. It's definitely extremely difficult most of the times for me to actually get up and work out or whatever. But I have to battle that notion in me that doesn't want to get physical, and I have to defeat it in order to come back and actually do the workout. So what I'm trying to say is that every struggle in life can be thought of as this kind of battle kind of thing. Now, I mentioned I mentioned that story to basically give a better gesture of what this means, meaning that while you are alive or your enemy is alive, even if you or your enemy, whoever, gets defeated, they can get back up and do stuff. So defeat is not permanent unless you let it be psychologically. Would you agree with this notion?
Absolutely. First of all, what a great way to put it out, because you made a very, very fantastic comparison of enemies, like in a real battlefield scenario versus in our day-to-day lives. And you're so right, because ultimately, the biggest enemies we'll ever fight are actually inside of us. These are the enemies that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Think about laziness. Think about jealousy. Think about various types of negativity, hopelessness, and pessimism. So you're definitely right to point out that ultimately the biggest battles in life are not with anybody else but ourselves. And that is precisely why this notion is very important, to be able to discern what it really means to fight the real enemy. And we're going to what you said earlier. You also reminded me of, our last discussion where you said you were working out early. And that's just a great example.
Right.
Like, I'm really, really happy to know that you're now pursuing basically your goals with more energy, because now you're getting up early in the morning. You exercise first thing in the morning, which is I'm a huge fan of, because I believe that people should not wait until, I don't know, right after work, let's say at 10 or 11 or something to go to gym. That's too late. It's best to work out in the morning before you begin your actual work, because that'll give you a lot of energy.
Yeah,
and
sure.
when it comes to this notion here, the notion of facing with basically your enemies, both within and without, I can also talk about how important it is for us to know that ultimately we always have a choice, and that choice is to keep moving forward. Because let's be honest, unfortunately, we haven't been taught, nowhere have we been taught the importance of persistence, the importance of never, ever accepting defeat. And another mentors of mine is Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee, he himself mentioned that he simply does not accept defeat. Like, defeat is something that you should accept. That is, it's impossible, no matter what you face with. Whether it's a complete collapse of your business, a serious problem in your relationship, a breakup, let's say a venture that goes wrong, whatever you can imagine, an accident, a health crisis, ultimately defeat is something you have to accept. That is, if you do not accept that defeat, that is, if you do not agree that, yes, I was defeated, I'm done, there's nothing in the world that can stop you, and there's nothing in the world that can actually force you to feel bad about that failure. And I really believe that this problem that we have nowadays is, and that a lot of us, we somehow don't understand that failure is a part of the success equation. I am baffled by the number of people who think that success is a one-way road, that some lucky people, quote unquote lucky, tend to actually get there somehow by chance because the alignment of the stars, and that the fact that life is great and these guys just happen to have that gift. I have been talking and studying and being with top performers in all fields, and not even once did I find them to be gifted in any particular way. I know a lot of gifted people, but most of them actually are depressed, or they're nobodies, basically. Nobody knows them. Basically, they don't do anything. They have not changed the world. So I know a lot of gifted people who are actually losers, but I've never met one successful person who was actually gifted, because ultimately what these people have in common is that tenacity, that ability to face with failure and obstacles and difficulties, and then get back up again and again and again. Today I had a post actually on social media about this issue, about what it really takes for someone to become an entrepreneur. And it really is very simple, but of course, a lot of us, we don't believe that. We think that, well, these guys are just lucky. These guys are all just, they happen to have some luck, and then that's just what they got. But in fact, in all aspects of life, in all facets of our lives, we are dealing with failures. But unfortunately, since an early age, and later basically enforced by the schooling system, we have been taught that failure, defeat, and mistake is a bad thing. And just imagine if you somehow were told that getting hungry is a bad thing, and that you felt ashamed of getting hungry every time you wanted to have a meal. How stupid would that be? Literally, just how stupid would that be if somebody told you that, what? You got hungry? Shame on you. How could you get so hungry so frequently?
Dare you?
Right? Literally, you get hungry and you want to have lunch now? This sounds really ridiculous, but guess what? This is exactly the same analogy as that of success, in that you need to fail to succeed. You learn by failure. In every area of life, when an airplane takes off, let's say from New York, and wants to land in San Francisco, this airplane is off course the majority of the time. And the pilot, or the system behind it, because nowadays, unfortunately, a lot of pilots are just, controlling the devices, so they're not actually doing anything. So this computer is basically readjusting every millisecond to get the damn thing basically landed in, let's say, San Francisco. And the same thing occurs in life, in that you are going to try something. You set a goal for yourself. You go for it. You fail. Boom. What am I supposed to do? Oh my gosh, I just don't have any talent, I guess. I should forget about it. But that's not the case, because you can actually keep trying again. But that's not what we were told since, we were a child. If we made a mistake, first our parents punished us. And then if we made mistakes in school, then our teachers also punished us by bad grades or by taking away their basically care and attention. And we've learned a very bad lesson, that it's bad somehow to fail. But failing is as necessary as, sorry to say this, going to the bathroom. I mean, just imagine how shameful you would have felt if they said, like, excuse me, you have to go to the bathroom? Do you understand what you're talking about? Like, you want to use the bathroom now? I mean, how ridiculous would that sound? But guess what? That's exactly what failure is. I mean, you literally have to take away all the junk that you're doing, reassess your approach, basically re-implement the new strategy, and then keep going forward. But ultimately, we have been told that no, it's not okay. You should not ever fail. And if you fail, you should hide it. And that is exactly why a lot of us in the world, we are simply unable to somehow have a right attitude towards failure. And defeat is a byproduct of that attitude. Defeat is a byproduct of believing that if I fail, then I am a failure. Because this is going to affect your concept. And you will then collapse psychologically, because then you lose your self-esteem, you feel bad about yourself, and boom, all of a sudden you're in an emotional, basically a roller coaster. All because one person at some point taught you that if you fail, then you are a failure. That if you lose, then you are a loser. That is simply bullshit. That is not true. If you fail, you are not a failure. You're a person who has failed, period. If you lose, then you are not a loser. You have simply lost an attempt to get the result that you want. That's it. And unfortunately, that's not how we see the world. A lot of us, that's not how we see the world. And because of this, we tend to see a lot of negativity now in the media, on social media, on television. And that's exactly why we have to address this issue right now with our listeners, to understand the importance that defeat is only a state of mind. It's nothing more than that, and that it really should never happen so long as you're alive.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I was actually, the quotes came to my mind reading, if you've never failed, you've never lived. And I didn't remember who's it attributed to, so I looked it up. I think it's an unknown author, but as with a lot of quotes, it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln on the internet. So I don't know who's attributed
Abraham
to.
Lincoln, Einstein. They get a lot of these basically quotes linked to them. That's right.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. The point stands. If you've never failed, you've never lived. Meaning you've never tried. Because, like,
absolutely,
it's impossible. How's that possible? Like, again, even especially actually for people who think of it as luck, then you have to play the numbers game. If it is luck, then you've got to play the numbers game, which isn't, as you mentioned, and if it isn't, and again, you're bound to fail, learn from your failures, and get up and get going. And that's again where it ties back to what we're talking about today. It's only a failure if you let it be permanent. It's only truly a failure. You as a person would be a failure if you let it go to waste, because failures are just lessons waiting to be learned. And if you learn those lessons and get up and get going at it, try it again, try it differently, try it slightly differently, completely differently, depending on the context and situation, then you're not defeated, because, again, you keep going. You might be defeated in the battle, but you'll win the war, and that's what matters. Like, there were so many instances that allies got defeated during the World War II, right? But what matters, who writes the history, is who wins the war, not the battle.
Exactly, man. And you pointed out right now about winning, basically that long-term mindset, because unfortunately, a lot of us, we are living in the short-term mindset. I remember once I had a post quite a few years back, I remember it was, and in that post, I was talking about the fact that the wealthiest people in America have financial plans for the next 25 years. That's right. They have plans, written plans financially, for the next 25 years. So when they make investments, they are literally planning that investment for the next 25 years. And once you look at the average person, they probably don't even have the plan for the next 25 days. So they don't even know how they're going to make it to the end of the month, right? So this long-term mindset, you're talking a lot, Pujix, now about the importance of trying to win the war, even if that means losing the battle. But that's not how we see it most of the time. Because let's be honest, the whole notion of future that we are a proponent of, basically, and we are promoting on our show, Beyond the Present, is that people don't have a real concept of the future. And because if you really want to build that mindset where you can actually think about the future, where you are planning for it, and where you tell yourself, I'm going to lose this short-term battle today, but I will win the war, that requires a long-term perspective. But let's be honest, Pujix, most of us, we don't have it. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who don't have it, they actually feel really upset when people talk about them because, that really brings about a lot of bad emotions for them. And we already know why that is. That's the case, because they simply have no plans for the future. And they say those who do not have a plan for the future cannot have a future, and that's a reality. So it somehow makes them very upset. And I want to ask you yourself, Pujix, because I have seen you basically transform yourself dramatically. Of course, you always had the seeds of greatness in you ever since basically I saw you a decade ago. But what I'm actually quite curious is how did you actually go through this journey of transforming yourself, and how did you build that long-term mindset that allowed you to accept defeat of the battle in the short term for the victory in the war in the long term? So what happened to you personally to develop that long-term perspective?
First of all, thank you for the compliment. It's awesome coming from you. I think few things had a lot to do with it. One of the things was, as soon as I started paying attention to people who I consider successful, who whether in my field or other, such as yourself, actually, the common denominator in all those people, there were a few things, but one of them for sure was that the notion that they would not give up. And my question to myself, at first, I was getting grasped by this notion. Oh yeah, you never give up because why not? Mm-hmm. But later on, I came to actually break it down and think about, why do they not actually give up? Because there has to be something deeper that is driving them. And it's not like they're angry at it and they're just going like an angry bull seeing the red sheet. No, there should be something more fundamental underneath it. Otherwise, they just run out of energy. And the more I thought about it, I realized I came to see this notion of long-term thinking. And like I call myself a quote-unquote futurist. And I think sometimes that term is thrown out mostly by people making predictions about the future. I'm more on the camp of people like Yuval Noah Harari, which in his book, Homo Deus, he actually subscripts the book, A Brief History of Future. And it's actually very counterintuitive, right? The history of future, how does that work? Because we think of history as what has happened. Now, it's like simplistically, his thesis is that we look at what could be in the future, and not just tomorrow, but years to come, to have a notion of how ready ourselves for that, and whether that is, or what parts of those possible futures are desirable for us as an individual, as a country, as a city, as a society, as the world, to be able to address those, make sure we're going the right direction, and at the same time, feed those paths that are desirable for us and make sure that the ones that are not are taken care of. So I think these two scenarios, combined with good stories, such as movies or video games with good stories of a long-term success, actually had a big impact on me, changing my course.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly, man. Because we have received a lot of great inspiration, and you mentioned so well about the importance of not giving up in the short term. Because when we face with obstacles and difficulties in the short term, we assume that's it. It's the end of the world. It's the final, the finale of my entire basically career has just befolded in front of me, and now I can see that there's no hope. And ultimately, the reason that these people don't give up is because they have that future in front of them that is driving them so much that it cannot be distracted by the petty problems in the present moment. Let me repeat that. Think of that, that wonderful, great future that you have imagined, in front of yourself. You have envisioned it, and you can now see it clearly in details. then once you have that as your main target, it's very difficult to be disheartened by the petty problems of the present moment. Gary Vee calls it focus on the macro and not the micro. And what he means by that is the micro are all the little petty stuff that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Oh my gosh, I lost my, let's say, wallet. Oh my gosh, I'm late in traffic. Oh my goodness, I just lost 2 clients today. Oh my goodness, the project wasn't approved. These are petty problems that we experience, right? But in the long term, once you have that long image, you say, dude, 2 clients now is nothing, because probably we're going to have thousands of clients once my company becomes double in size, right? So we call this, by the way, there's a great, mental practice that I learned from one of my mentors. And this was called borrowing value from your future. Let me just explain a little bit. This explains why a lot of hyper successful people simply do not give up in the present moment, despite facing with some serious, sometimes horrendous events. Why is that? Because these are the people who are borrowing value from their future. Now, what does that mean? Think of, for example, Bill Gates. All right. Think of Bill Gates when he was 28, 29 years old, 25, 26, a little nerd coding by himself most of the time. This kid, and think of like Bill Gates right now, right? Worth more than $70 billion. And compare this kid at that time and Bill Gates today. Well, today, Bill Gates is worth how much? 70 billion, right? More than that, probably. I should check out the Forbes list. But the point is, he's worth a lot of money.
According to Forbes, today is $102.9 billion. So 102
wow, this was
almost
amazing,
103.
In less than friggin' 4 years, he increased that much. That's the power of compound interest, by the way. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, so, while doing so many
by the way,
philanthropy.
That's right. Because of this very reason, actually. And the point is, if you think of him right now, worth more than $100 billion, right? And I'm not sure exactly about his exact age right now, but can you guess how old is he? Could you find out about the exact age?
He is 63 years old.
63. Okay, so he is worth $1 billion, more than probably close to 1.5, 1.4 billion per year of his life. So when he was in his 20s, he was not worth 100 billion. But he became a person worth more than 100 billion at the age of 63, right? So if that man at that age would have seen this future and would have borrowed that value that he has in his 63 and used it in terms of his emotional being at this current age, he would have changed the world dramatically. He would probably be right now worth twice as much, right? The point is, you have to be the same person. You have to believe that you're going to have a great future. And to do so, of course, you need to have a lot of plans and be ambitious enough to actually follow them. But once you set the goals and you build that future, that amazing future you want to have for yourself, then you can borrow value from that. For example, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you just lost 3 or 4 of your clients. And you have a total client base of, let's say, 30 people, right? So right now, losing 3 clients is losing 10% of your entire clientele and probably more than 10% of your revenue. But the fact of the matter is, once you think big, you say, well, probably in about a decade, we'll have thousands of clients. So you say, well, will I care about losing 3 clients today when, in fact, in less than a decade, we're going to have thousands of clients? So you say, well, in that time, let's say if I have 1,000 clients, then losing 3 clients is not even 1%. It's like 0.003% of my clients. So it's nothing. So it doesn't matter. This is a great example of borrowing value from the future and using it in the present to emotionally overcome the difficulties and challenges. Because the fact of the matter is, if you're really working at your goals, if you're, really passionate about it, if you're putting in the work, then of course you will grow. And of course, at some point you get better. But the point is, we don't see that. And by doing this mental practice of borrowing value from the future and dealing with the problems today, all of a sudden, once you look at the macro, which is the big stuff, then the micro, the little stuff, seems just so petty and unimportant. Like, I lost 3 clients. Who the hell cares? In 5 years from now, we don't even remember that. Probably going to have thousands more. So this is, of course, in business. You can apply the same mindset in everything else, whether it's losing, some chance and opportunity, whether it's, failing to make the high school's basketball team, or whatever it really is, whatever problem you got right now. You can look at it by borrowing value from the future and thinking at a macro level and not being so much concerned with the micro. And this is one of the biggest secrets of high achievers. You say, How could you lose $200 million overnight and not be fucking depressed, man? And the reason is very simple, because the guy who is now losing $200 million, he's now thinking about probably a couple hundred billion. And this doesn't seem that much to him, right? Or whatever analogy you want to use, whether it's for championships that you want to win, whether it's for education you want to have, or whatever it is. So because of this, I'm a huge fan of using this mental technique of borrowing value from the future in order to overcome obstacles and not feel so down by the petty problems of the present moment.
Very well said. I think so. I think there's this notion. I mean, I didn't hear it this way. What do you call it? Like, what did Gary Vee call it? Borrowing value from your future, right?
Macro thinking versus micro thinking.
I think I've heard this within the context of when people obsess about like very small few little things, the notion comes to be, for example, think of how much this thing that you're obsessing about or you're upset about or whatever matters in a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, 50-year scale. Like, does it really make that much of a difference? And that could be a good, and maybe it does. It's just a good way to think about whether this is actually as important as you think it is right now in the big scale. Like, think of it 10 years from now. What do you think of this moment, given what happened now? Like, forget about what can happen in the meantime. Let's say this is fixed in stone. There's nothing, like, whatever happens, something bad happened. You mentioned $2 million lost, etc. You got injured, for example, if you think of championship. Now, think of it in 10 years. Like, now, injury and championship, depending on the injury, could be actually a big deal. But again, if Bill Gates is a Bill Gates of $100 billion today, probably he would, if he lost when he was 20 something, if he lost $2 million, he wouldn't probably, now he would be like, yeah, that really didn't matter much. So I heard about this notion in this context before, exactly. But I've never heard of it in the generic sense that you mentioned, which is pretty interesting. Yeah. So
that's right.
Now, coming full circle, now there's also another, I think, obsessive behavior that could be destructive, which is not really it's somewhat more hidden, because if you're giving up, it's at least obvious that you're giving up. But then some people obsess about doing something, basically failing, getting back up and continuing, however, not learning from their failures, so repeating mistakes, if you will. Now, how do we address that? So first of all, I think the most important thing is that, I guess, that person, if he knew he was repeating a mistake, he wouldn't do it. So I guess the first and the most important, probably the hardest step, is to actually figure out that what is it that you're learning from your failures. How do you do that?
Absolutely. You see, this is very critical. Now, we talk a lot about the importance of maintaining the right emotional state of mind and being dedicated to your goal and not giving up and persisting. But I mean, there's a great phrase basically by Mr. Tony Robbins that he says, if you're looking for sunset and you're running towards east, you are going to have a problem no matter how enthusiastic you are, because you simply won't do that. You won't see that happen, which is why part of success and part of dealing effectively with your failures is to learn from them. And there's a great phrase, I put it basically on my Instagram stories a while back, and that was, the moment you learn the lesson of a failure, the pain disappears. Because every failure contains within it a lot of great lessons that you can apply. And that is why I believe that just by having a positive mindset, you are only half the way there. Because if you are, no matter how enthusiastic you are, if you keep banging your head against the wall, say, well, Daniel said never give up. I'll keep banging my head against the same wall to get out of my house. No, you got to find the door, dude. And that's not the door. You got to find the door, open it, and just get out, right? So the same analogy applies to anything else in life. I'm saying don't give up, but I'm not saying bang your head against the same wall, hoping that finally this will allow you to, open the door. You want to look for the doors and you want to open it, which is why you want to always look at all failures in terms of learning lessons. So anytime I personally face with any obstacle or difficulty, I ask myself, so what happened here? So I try to actually analyze the entire situation. And that sometimes, by the way, is very difficult, even especially if you're busy. But you got to do that, because otherwise you will experience psychological trauma. After that, you then ask yourself, all right, so what did I do right here? it's very important to start by asking, what did I do right? Because that will then allow you to be in a more positive state of mind and not feel unhappy about yourself. So what did I do right here? I did this right. I did this right. Okay, good. Now I'm feeling in a good state. So what did I do wrong here? Now, at that time, you start asking yourself this question. You know what you did wrong. So you ask, well, I did this. Perhaps I made this mistake. Okay, and this probably was not right. So that has definitely affected this issue, right? And at that time, once you finally know what you did wrong, then you ask the final question. How can I make sure that this problem or this pain or this issue or this loss never happens again? And that's the moment where you look for the lessons. Okay, sure, you should do this from now on differently. You should change this part. And, it's kind of like being an entrepreneur, right? Like sometimes one mistake in your business will force you to re-examine everything, and you learn 50 lessons in one day on how to change your basically business, right? The same thing happens here. So you ask yourself now, what will I do now? Because unfortunately, when people fail or they have a problem in their relationships, for example, they start blaming, oh, that guy's an asshole. Well, there's a reason he acted like an asshole. Let's be honest, man, because people don't just normally act like an asshole. Especially if he was nice at the beginning, right? Like, let's say you had a client and everything was going pretty well, and then you did something or said something, and after a while, the client suddenly changed his behavior and acted like an asshole. Well, there's clear evidence that he's not an asshole because at first he was very nice. So probably you did something or made some basically mistakes that led to him acting like an asshole. That girl's a bitch, man. She's a fucking bitch. She doesn't listen to me, and everything was good, and now she's acting all like a bitch. Well, there's got to be a reason that your girlfriend or your partner or your ex-girlfriend, whatever it is acting like let's say, a woman of low moral fiber. And the reason is that you have done something. So ask yourself, what did I do that led to my girlfriend, for example, moving from all nice and kind to acting all of a sudden in such a bitchy way? There's got to be a reason here. Now, let's be honest, this process is not easy at all, because in the process of trying to find the lessons, you have to review those basically bad experiences. And once you review those bad experiences, you inevitably will feel some emotional trauma as well. It's just part of the process, which is why it's very important to develop the habit of strength. To say, yes, I'm going to have to go through the entire basically process one more time in my head to know what did I do wrong and what lessons I can learn. And I know it'll be very painful to rethink my relationship or to rethink my business plan or to rethink my sales presentation or whatever it is. It'll be painful, but it's totally worth it, because in that case, you will learn the lesson. And trust me, once you have the courage to go through the pain of reviewing that experience and finding the lessons, I promise you, that pain will instantly and permanently disappear, and you will learn a lesson and you can move on. But here's a problem. If you don't do this, then that nightmare will keep chasing you for the rest of your life. Sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. I know people right now who are hung up on bad relationships they had years ago. Like, it's been years since they've broken up, but they're still hung up on that little girl, that little boy that just got away, right? And this is a serious problem. I know a lot of people who are still hung up on the pain they experienced with some clients years ago. Why? Because they tried to blame the client or blame the situation instead of learning the lesson. And once they do that, of course, things get a lot better. So that's very, very important to look at our failures in a critical way, analyze it, get the lesson, and of course, follow that by some kind of action that will show that you've changed and that you're willing to change your approach. Once you do that, then nothing can stop you, because you will fail. Unlike most people, you're like, why did it happen to me? Why me? Why now? Why? Like, so you stop that, mental BS, and instead you say, all right, what happened here? Number one. Number two, what did I do right here? Number three, what did I do wrong here? Number four, what will I do differently next time to make sure this never happens again? And once you learn a lesson, then boom, it's time to take action. And once you do that, of course, the pain will instantly disappear. That is why it's so critical to analyze your failures, learn the lessons, and more importantly, implement the lesson as soon as possible and to make the changes necessary.
Such a great analogy when you mentioned that banging your head against the same wall, hoping to get through. So that's basically what I meant, like the difference between,
of course,
not giving up and, banging your head against the same wall and expecting to get through.
Exactly, because there's nothing good about that, man. That's not a very cool thing. It's not noble.
Yeah, exactly. So the great distinction. I think it made it super clear, and I couldn't have done a better job. Uh, and overall, great explanation. So, getting back to the notion of, okay, failure. If you think of making up excuses and pointing fingers, then if you're not wrong, you can't learn anything. So you're going to repeat the mistake. And no matter how much of it was environmental, meaning somebody else's fault, etc., it had to be somewhat your fault. So and if it was somebody else's fault, maybe that's your fault trusting them or whatever. So that part would be your mistake. So and you can't control the other person's behavior or the environment's behavior or the economics behavior, etc. All you can do is that,
Exactly.
what can I do to ensure this thing doesn't happen to me again? And that is the process that you explained. So I think that ownership part of it, that is, okay, what is my part in this failure and what can I do next time better, is the part that should be the center of focus. First of all, because it's the only useful thing you can do. Secondly, because when you figure that out, now you can make your peace with the phenomenon. You, again, as you mentioned, you don't get hung up on it. So I think it's like, hands down, great explanation. I think I couldn't have done a better job myself at it. Now we're
Appreciate
yeah,
it. Pretty good.
we are
That's right.
rapidly approaching the end of the show. It doesn't feel like 36 whatever minutes, but it is apparently. So with that, do you have any final comments? Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to add on?
That's right. As we already mentioned, and first of all, I want to thank you so much for choosing such a great topic, and this great quote from Jocko. The point is, as you mentioned, and as we've already discussed, ultimately you are going to fail in life. You will fail a lot. Of course, the degree to which you fail depends on the scale of your dream and the depth of your ambition. So if you're the kind of guy who would like to set big goals, then be prepared for a lot of big failures. And obviously, if you just want to get by and just keep going to your, work that your office work that you really hate, and just get your salary and just live a very silent, quiet, we call this quiet desperation. If you want to live that kind of life, then of course you will not make as many mistakes. Let's be honest. So, if you have big dreams, if you have big ambitions, get ready for massive, big failures. And because of that, you got to, somehow entertain the notion of what it really takes to get you there, and that requires you to inevitably face with failures and then not basically give in to those problems. And today we talked a lot about the importance of mindset. What is the right mindset in the face of obstacles? And we said that defeat is just a state of mind. It is an emotional state. It is not real. And it cannot basically occur if you do not accept it. And we said that so long as you're alive, all defeats are in your head. That is, they're just psychological. They're not real, and you can actually get over them. And having said that, once you have this mindset that you simply have the power within you to deal with problems effectively and to get out of those situations and issues, then obviously you will be able to get the most out of your life by facing with those problems and then trying to learn from them. And we also talked a lot about the importance of not banging your head against the same wall and saying, well, Daniel said I should not give up, so my head is bleeding and I probably have some concussion, but Daniel said I should not give up, so let's keep banging against the wall. Well, that, as we earlier mentioned, that's a very stupid approach towards life. Now, it is very good that you have the kind of emotional strength that can just push through it, but guys, sometimes, working hard and being basically hardworking should be combined with smart work and basically learning from the issues. So if you're really trying your best and you're pushing and things aren't working, then probably the chances are you're not doing the right things. And that requires you to just stop, bang your head against the same wall, and just take a step back and say, well, this is the wall, this is the closet, that's the door. Okay, what a concept, man. Sorry, I'm going to go out of the door now. All right. So you wanted to take that step back. Whatever problem or crisis you face with, take a step back. All right. And we already mentioned there are 4 questions you want to ask yourself. What happened here? Because sometimes we don't even know what happened. Like, people are like, well, no, I don't know. Well, my girlfriend's a bitch. That's not what happened. What happened is your girlfriend suddenly shifted from being very nice and kind to being mean and not, for example, responding to you. That's what happened. Number 2, what did I do right here? Well, in that state of mind, probably you'll be very like, I didn't do anything right, man. It was all bad. No. What did you write? Well, I attracted her in the first place. We had a very good few dates. We started dating. Things were going well. Okay, that's good. Now, what did I do wrong here? well, maybe I just started doing this or this or this or that, and this suddenly gives you, gets you in a very different state of mind. Now, all of a sudden, you're not angry, you're thinking, you're pondering. Tony Robbins says, when you win, you party, but when you lose, you ponder. That's exactly what happens with failure, which is why failure is ultimately better for you in the long term than winning. That's just such a concept. But failure is better for you in the long term. Just imagine the positive emotional feeling you will have next time you fail. Like, dude, failure is better for my future than success. Because when you succeed, you don't change. You don't learn anything new. You just party. Oh, yes, man, I got it. Another great deal, right? For example. But when you fail, you ponder. And in that pondering, you discover a lot of wisdom and gems that can help you in the future to get a lot more done. So with that mindset, and hopefully by knowing how to change your approach and then learning the lessons and then applying them again, you will at some point reach a point where it becomes impossible. It becomes impossible for you to actually be stopped. And you will then be able to continue pushing on despite all the challenges. And I really would like to express that if you want to realize your dreams, then you probably need to actually implement this strategy. And of course, next time you had a serious pain or difficult situation, if you felt that the world has come to an end, if some lover or some basically a person you cared about left you, or if some problems happening in your business, come back to this episode and listen to it again, because our emotions need to be tuned. So listen to this show right now that we had with Pujix. It's pretty good to listen to this once, but I would really recommend you to come back to this next time you face with a serious problem, and just re-listen the program and try to find out, oh, right, that's all right. Because once your emotional state is changed with the help of our conversation, hopefully here, you will then find good, basically ideas, and that'll help you to solve your problems. Overall, that was it. And I really like this topic and concept that you chose for today's show, basically, Pujix. And I appreciate you for that. That was great.
Thank you. What a concept. This notion of if you learn more from failures than you learn from success. Excellent concept. And thank you for joining us, Dan. I know you're super busy, but thank you for taking the time every week.
It's my pleasure, buddy. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you guys for joining us as always. Until a later episode. Have a good one.